In the serene suburb of Maplewood Lane, nestled in the heart of Crestview County, a pregnant Latina woman was enjoying a quiet evening stroll with her young daughter when a white neighbor dialed 911, branding her as suspicious. Within moments, police descended, and without a shred of evidence, they pinned her against their cruiser, ignoring her cries of agony and her child's terrified wails. Her loyal border collie, Max, barked once before a gunshot silenced him forever. Unbeknownst to them, her husband was no ordinary man. He was the county's most influential official. His response would make them regret their actions profoundly. Before we dive into this powerful story, drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your thoughts and connecting with our community. Maplewood Lane glowed under the soft amber light of a late summer evening, as tranquil as a pastoral painting. Charming craftsman homes lined the street, their manicured lawns framed by low picket fences, each bursting with vibrant roses, lavender, and peonies in full bloom. At the corner of Elmwood Avenue, a towering maple tree cast long, dappled shadows over the pristine cobblestone sidewalk. Everything exuded cultivated perfection, yet beneath this polished surface, a subtle undercurrent of scrutiny and judgment simmered, unspoken but ever present. The neighborhood prided itself on its order, its quiet elegance. But that order came with an invisible expectation. Everyone had to fit a certain mold. Sofia Ramirez, 34, had recently relocated to Maplewood Lane with her husband and their 4-year-old daughter, Amelia. Her face carried the exhaustion of weeks spent unpacking their new home, her pregnancy adding a gentle weight to her steps. Clad in a flowing cotton sundress, a wide-brimmed straw hat, and oversized sunglasses that shielded much of her face, Sofia pushed Amelia's stroller, while Max, their spirited border collie, trotted happily beside them. Sofia inhaled the cool evening air, savoring a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos of settling into a new life. She glanced at Amelia, who giggled at Max's playful bounds, chasing his tail with boundless energy. The sight warmed Sofia's heart, offering a fleeting reprieve from the fatigue that clung to her. As they paused beneath the maple tree, Sofia felt a mild contraction ripple through her abdomen. She winced softly, placing a hand on her slightly swollen belly, and whispered to Amelia, who looked up with wide, curious eyes, clutching a small, stuffed bunny. Max nudged Sofia's leg, his intelligent eyes bright and reassuring, his black and white fur catching the fading light. Sofia leaned gently against the tree trunk, closing her eyes to steal a moment of calm. The evening breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and for a brief moment, she felt at home in this new place. But a sudden chill ran down her spine. Even with her eyes closed, she sensed it. Someone was watching her, their gaze sharp and intrusive. Across the street, a lace curtain twitched in a pristine bay window. Karen Thompson, a white woman in her early 50s, stood behind it, her sharp gaze sweeping over Sofia, Amelia, and Max. Years ago, Karen had been the victim of a break-in at her previous home in a nearby town, and since then, a deep-seated fear had festered within her, warping into suspicion toward anyone who didn't fit her narrow vision of Maplewood Lane's residents. Sofia's warm olive skin, unfamiliar face, and casual attire triggered that fear. Without evidence or wrongdoing, Karen made a swift, baseless judgment. This woman was out of place, a potential threat to the neighborhood's carefully curated harmony. With trembling hands, Karen lifted her phone, snapping a blurry photo of Sofia's silhouette beneath the maple tree. The hazy image captured only vague outlines of Sofia, Amelia's stroller, and Max. But for Karen, it was proof enough of her suspicions. She uploaded the photo to the Maplewood Lane Neighbors Facebook group, accompanied by a biting, accusatory caption. Suspicious woman with a kid and dog loitering near my house. Looks like she's up to something shady. A handful of likes appeared almost instantly, followed by vague, implicitly approving comments from neighbors who didn't bother to question her. Seen her around before. Looks off, one wrote. Better safe than sorry, another added. No one asked for clarification. No one challenged her post. Emboldened by the group's silent agreement, Karen dialed 911, her voice sharp with exaggerated urgency. There's a suspicious Latina woman hanging around Elmwood Avenue and Maplewood Lane. She's acting strange, probably scoping out houses for something bad. She's got a kid and a dog with her. The piercing wail of police sirens shattered the evening's tranquility, drowning out the gentle chirping of crickets, the rustle of maple leaves, and Amelia's soft giggles. Sophia flinched, her moment of peace torn apart. The patrol car's headlights locked onto her, Amelia, and Max like a spotlight slicing through the calm air. Her heart pounded in her chest, an ominous dread washing over her. Nearby windows cracked open, curious eyes darting toward her before hastily shutting, as if neighbors feared being drawn into the unfolding drama. A few lingered, their silhouettes barely visible behind curtains, watching silently. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. Officer Bradley, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a recent disciplinary warning for cutting corners on protocol, led the charge. Eager to redeem himself in the department and prove his toughness, Bradley saw Karen's call as a golden opportunity to assert his authority in this affluent enclave. A report from a white, seemingly credible resident like Karen was all the justification he needed to act without hesitation. Beside him was Officer Nguyen, a younger, less experienced officer who followed Bradley's lead, his face taut with unease, but unwilling to question his superior's actions. Bradley strode toward Sophia, his eyes narrowed with prejudice. He grabbed her elbow roughly, his grip bruising, and yanked her toward the cruiser. Sophia cried out in pain, her hand instinctively clutching her belly as Amelia began to wail in her stroller, clutching her bunny tighter. Max growled, his fur bristling as he barked frantically, circling Sophia's legs in a desperate attempt to protect her. Bradley sneered, dismissing Sophia's pain and Amelia's distress. "You think you can just stroll around here with a kid and a dog?" he snapped, his voice thick with contempt. "Show me your ID. Right now." His tone suggested that Sophia's very presence was an insult to the neighborhood's pristine order, a disruption of its carefully maintained facade. Sophia's throat tightened, her pulse racing as if it would burst from her chest. Cold sweat beaded on her palms as she tried to steady her trembling voice. She explained that they had just moved to Elmwood Avenue, that she hadn't brought her ID for a short evening walk, and that she was pregnant. Her words came out choked with fear, but Bradley wasn't listening. He scoffed, his eyes glinting with disdain. "Pregnant? You don't look pregnant. Don't play games with me." He dismissed her plea as a cheap tactic to evade responsibility, his prejudice blinding him to her visible pain and Amelia's terrified sobs. Nguyen stood silently, staring at the ground, avoiding Sophia's pleading gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. Amid the escalating tension, Sophia seized a fleeting chance to slip her hand into her pocket, her fingers trembling as she sent a desperate text to her husband. "Police, help!" Elmwood Avenue. The contractions in her belly intensified, a sharp, twisting pain radiating through her abdomen. She gasped, struggling to breathe, her face paling as sweat dampened her forehead and temples. She bit her lip to stifle a moan, but failed. Looking at Bradley with desperate, pleading eyes, her voice broke. "I'm pregnant. My stomach hurts so badly. I need to sit down and call my husband. Please. My daughter." She hoped her words might spark a shred of humanity in him, a flicker of compassion for her obvious distress and Amelia's fear. but Bradley's gaze remained cold and unyielding. He turned to Nguyen, muttering just loud enough for Sophia to hear. Faking pregnancy to get out of trouble. An old trick. Don't let her fool you. Karen, who had stepped onto her front porch, smirked with malicious satisfaction. Her eyes glinted with bitter glee as she called out in a shrill voice, "Why are you still pretending to be pregnant? We know your kind. You don't belong here. Stop trying to deceive everyone." Her words, dripping with venom, fueled Bradley's resolve, as if confirming his suspicions. She urged the officers on, her voice rising with vindictive zeal. "Don't let her get away. She's been lurking around here all evening, looking suspicious." Karen's accusations, paired with Bradley's indifference, struck Sophia like a barrage of knives, leaving her breathless and surrounded by hostility. Without hesitation, Bradley pulled out his handcuffs. The cold clink of metal echoed in the quiet evening, like an invisible sentence handed down without trial. He clamped the cuffs tightly on Sophia's wrists, locking them behind her back. The pressure drew a groan of pain from her, tears spilling uncontrollably down her cheeks. But Bradley showed no mercy. The cuffs bit into her skin, exacerbating the pain of her contractions, and she struggled to keep her balance as her legs trembled beneath her. As Max's barks grew more frantic, Nguyen, rattled by the chaos and pressured by Bradley's authority, drew his pistol and fired point blank at the border collie. Max collapsed with a faint whimper, his sleek black and white body lifeless on the cobblestone. Sophia choked on a sob, her voice raw with horror and grief. "Max! No!" Her body swayed as the pain in her belly surged, mingling with the gut-wrenching loss of her loyal companion. Amelia's cries pierced the air, her tiny face crumpled in terror as she clutched her bunny, her small body shaking. But Bradley roughly pulled Sophia toward the cruiser, ignoring her clutched belly and her anguished expression. Nguyen kicked Max's lifeless body aside, and Sophia was shoved into the back seat. Amelia's stroller left abandoned on the sidewalk as a neighbor, Mrs. Clara Evans, rushed to take her. The cruiser door slammed shut, the lock's dry click echoing like shackles, binding Sophia to a nightmare of helplessness. Inside the cramped cruiser, Sophia felt the air grow thin. The contractions weighed heavily, each breath a struggle. She pressed a hand to her belly, terrified for her unborn child, and heartbroken over Max's death. Hot tears streamed down her face as she squeezed her eyes shut, overwhelmed by fear for Amelia, now in a stranger's care, and the crushing grief of losing Max. "I thought Maplewood Lane was a safe haven," she thought, "a new beginning for our family. But I'm just an outcast, a target of their prejudice. Will my baby be safe? Will Amelia be okay after this?" Fear and despair engulfed her, pulling her into a dark abyss with no escape. Her only lifeline was the faint hope of the message she'd sent her husband, a fragile thread of salvation in a world that seemed to have turned against her. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Diego Ramirez was concluding a critical budget meeting at the county courthouse. As the county commissioner, his days were filled with high-stakes decisions, but nothing prepared him for the buzz of his phone. Seeing Sophia's text, "Police, help!" Elmwood Avenue. His blood ran cold. Without a word, he sprinted to his sleek black SUV, tires screeching as he sped toward Maplewood Lane. He slammed on the brakes in front of the cruiser, the jarring noise startling Karen, Bradley, Nguyen, and Mrs. Clara Evans, who watched with mounting concern from her porch, holding Amelia tightly. Diego emerged from his vehicle, tall and commanding, his eyes blazing with fury and fear. He strode toward the cruiser, his voice thundering across Elmwood Avenue. "Release my wife, now! What are you doing to her? Where's her dog? Where's my daughter?" His words froze the air, commanding every eye to turn toward him. Karen's smirk vanished, Bradley's confidence wavered, and Nguyen's hands shook. Mrs. Evans's worried expression deepened, her hands clutching Amelia's stroller as the child whimpered. Diego reached the cruiser, his gaze locking onto Sophia, handcuffed and clutching her belly, her face etched with pain. He glanced at Max's lifeless body on the cobblestone and Amelia's stroller, now in Mrs. Evans's care. Rage surged within him, a fiery mix of protective instinct and righteous indignation. He pulled out his commissioner's badge and a family photo of Sophia, Amelia, and himself, the image capturing a happier moment under a different tree. His voice was sharp, each word a hammer strike. "This is Sofia Ramirez, my wife. I'm Commissioner Diego Ramirez. You've handcuffed a pregnant woman in distress, traumatized our daughter, and what have you done to our dog?" As the county's most powerful official, he demanded, "Give me your names and badge numbers, immediately." Bradley flinched, his face draining of color. He'd heard of the new commissioner, but never imagined this suspicious woman was his wife. He realized this wasn't a routine arrest, but a career-ending mistake, a catastrophic error born of his own prejudice and haste. Nguyen paled, his hands fumbling, unsure how to respond, his inexperience leaving him paralyzed. Karen, frozen on her porch, dropped her scarf, her eyes wide with disbelief, her smugness replaced by a creeping dread. Mrs. Evans, witnessing the scene, shifted from shock to quiet outrage, her maternal instincts stirred by Amelia's distress. Whispers rippled through cracked windows, the neighborhood's silence broken by murmurs. The commissioner? That's his wife? The entire Maplewood Lane seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the weight of the unfolding drama. Bradley stammered, his voice quivering, grasping for a defense. "Commissioner, we were just following procedure." But Diego's piercing gaze allowed no excuses, cutting through the feeble justification like a blade. Bradley knew his prejudice had led him to a grave error, one that threatened the career he'd painstakingly built over decades. Nguyen, trembling, didn't wait for another order. He unlocked the cruiser door and shakily removed Sophia's handcuffs, his fingers fumbling with the key. His eyes met hers, filled with belated remorse, but Sophia looked away, too overwhelmed by pain, loss, and the lingering terror of the moment. Sophia stumbled into Diego's arms, clinging to him tightly, her body trembling with a mix of relief, grief, and exhaustion. Her tears flowed, not just from the fear and pain, but from the crushing grief for Max and the trauma Amelia had endured. Diego held her close, his presence a solid shield against the hostile world that had descended upon her. He turned to the officers, his voice deep and unyielding, each word carrying the weight of his authority. "Your procedure ignored a pregnant woman's cries of pain, endangered my wife, my daughter, and our unborn child. You shot an innocent animal, our family's companion. This isn't procedure, it's abuse. A full report, every detail from the 911 call to the handcuffing of my wife, the killing of our dog, and the abandonment of my daughter, must be on my desk by 8 a.m. tomorrow. I'll personally oversee it. Justice will be served. No one, not police officers, no residents, is above the law in this county." He paused, his gaze flicking to Max's lifeless body, the sight fueling his anger further. "And your killing of our family's dog will never be forgiven. That was our daughter's friend, a loyal companion who brought joy to our home." His words weren't just a husband's vow, but a leader's pledge to protect his community from such injustices. He continued, his voice resonating with unyielding power. "I'll ensure a thorough investigation into this incident, including the entire chain of events, from the initial call to the actions that followed. No one can act on prejudice in my county, not without consequences." Diego turned to Karen, his eyes cold and piercing, his presence towering over her. What kind of people are allowed to walk their dogs or stroll with their children in this neighborhood, Ms. Thompson? Only those who meet your approval? Your actions, your baseless call, your inflammatory post will face scrutiny. Prejudice has no place here, and I'll ensure it's rooted out. Karen shrank, her voice barely a whisper, her confidence shattered. I just thought, she didn't look like she belonged. I didn't know. Her excuses rang hollow, deepening her shame as the weight of her actions settled over her like a storm cloud. Mrs. Clara Evans, her silver hair catching the fading light, stepped forward from her porch, still holding Amelia's stroller. Her voice was clear and steady, loud enough for the neighbors peeking through curtains to hear. Karen, that was Sofia Ramirez, the commissioner's wife. She was in pain. Her child was terrified, and you saw them shoot her dog. Your 911 call was a terrible mistake, and it's caused untold harm. Her words were a cold jolt, shaking Karen to her core, forcing her to confront the gravity of her actions. Mr. Patel, a neighbor who'd once been wrongly profiled for gardening late in his yard, stood beside Mrs. Evans. His voice was calm but resolute, carrying the weight of shared experience. This kind of prejudice can't continue in our community. We must do better, for all our sakes. Sophia, still trembling but bolstered by Diego's presence, faced Karen. Her eyes were no longer clouded with fear, but steady with a quiet, unyielding resolve. Her voice shook slightly, but each word was firm, resonating with a strength born of her ordeal. I don't need your apology, Miss Thompson. An apology can't erase the terror I felt, the pain I endured, or Max's death. It can't undo the trauma my daughter witnessed, the fear that will linger in her heart. Karen's head bowed, unable to meet Sophia's gaze, her face pale with shame. Sophia continued, her voice now clear and commanding, cutting through the evening air. What I need is a world where no one is deemed suspicious because of their skin color or background. You nearly caused a tragedy for me, my daughter, and my unborn child. I'll make sure this never happens to anyone else in this county, no matter who they are. Diego clasped Sophia's hand tightly, his gaze unwavering, a silent promise of support. He addressed Karen and the officers, his voice deep and authoritative, each word a verdict that brooked no defiance. This incident will be thoroughly investigated. Your actions, Ms. Thompson's call, Officers Bradley and Nguyen's conduct, including the killing of our dog, will face consequences. Prejudice and abuse of power stop here, in this neighborhood, in this county. His words were not just a warning, but a proclamation, a line drawn in the sand. Diego and Sophia turned, slowly walking away, collecting Amelia from Mrs. Evans's care. Amelia clung to her mother, her small face still wet with tears, her bunny clutched tightly. They didn't look back at Karen, Bradley, or Nguyen, but Diego's heavy silence spoke volumes, a condemnation louder than any shout. Karen remained frozen on her porch, her face ashen, her self-assured smile extinguished like a candle in a storm. As the evening light faded, casting long shadows across Elmwood Avenue, her mind reeled. She'd not only targeted an innocent woman, but provoked the county's most powerful man. Her legs buckled, and she sank onto her porch steps, feeling an abyss open beneath her. I just thought, she mumbled, her voice pitiful and trembling. I didn't believe she was pregnant. Her weak excuses only deepened her regret, each word a reminder of the mistake that could ruin her life, and standing in Maplewood Lane. The neighborhood fell into an eerie hush, the usual hum of evening activity replaced by a tense silence. Mrs. Clara Evans, her eyes filled with disappointment, met Karen's gaze. She'd seen Karen's post on the community group and witnessed Sophia's arrest, her pain, Amelia's fear, and Max's senseless death. Her conscience demanded action, refusing to let such injustice pass unaddressed. Approaching Karen, her voice cut through the stillness, clear and resonant. "Karen, you caused pain to Commissioner Ramirez's wife, a new neighbor in distress. You saw her suffering, her child crying, her dog shot dead. Your actions have consequences, and they've hurt this community." Her words were a cold splash of reality, shaking Karen to her core, forcing her to confront the harm she'd caused. Mr. Patel, who'd once been wrongly suspected for lingering near a playground while picking up his son, added his voice to the rebuke. His tone was calm but heavy with conviction. "This kind of prejudice can't go on. We're better than this, or we should be." His words echoed a community beginning to confront its flaws, a slow awakening to the need for change. Sophia, still shaken but standing tall beside Diego, looked at Karen. Her eyes held a quiet strength, a fire kindled by her ordeal. "I don't want your apology," she repeated, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I want change. No one should fear walking in their own neighborhood with their child. I'll fight for justice. Not just for me, but for Amelia, my unborn child, and everyone else who's been judged unfairly." As Diego and Sophia drove away with Amelia, the Maplewood Lane neighborhood remained cloaked in silence, the weight of the incident settling over it like a heavy fog. No more curious glances flickered behind curtains. The neighbors who'd watched now grappled with their own complicity in staying silent. Everyone felt the gravity of what had happened, a costly lesson etched into the community's memory, a wound that would not easily heal. Karen stood alone, her eyes vacant, confronting the steep price of her prejudice. Her life in Maplewood Lane, once so secure, now teetered on the brink of collapse, her reputation unraveling with each passing moment. In their SUV, Sophia leaned her head on Diego's shoulder, her breathing uneven, her body still trembling from the ordeal. The pain of Max's loss and the trauma of Amelia's fear gnawed at her heart, intensifying her worries about an unjust future for her children. She whispered, her voice fragile and laced with anxiety. "What if you hadn't come in time? I'm terrified for our kids, for what they'll face after this. What kind of world will they grow up in if this can happen?" Diego gripped her hand tightly, his gaze fixed forward, resolute and unyielding. "I won't let this happen again, Sophia. Never. This is our home, our county, and I'll protect it from this hatred." His voice was a vow, strong and unshakable, a promise carved in stone. The physical pain in Sophia's belly eased slightly, but the emotional scars of Max's death, Amelia's terror, and the injustice ran deep, like a river cutting through her soul. She stared out at the passing homes of Maplewood Lane, their facades blurring like a slow-motion film, each one a reminder of the hostility she'd faced. But amidst the pain, a quiet resolve grew within her, a spark that refused to be extinguished. "This pain won't fade," she thought, "but I'll use it to fuel change. For Amelia, for our baby, for others, with Diego by my side." She knew the healing journey would be long and arduous, but she was no longer alone, and that knowledge gave her strength. 8 weeks later, Diego's investigation exposed the full extent of the incident's misconduct, leaving no stone unturned. Security footage from Elmwood Avenue, combined with Mrs. Clara Evans's detailed and comprehensive testimony, confirmed every detail. Karen's baseless 911 call, driven by prejudice, Officer Bradley's blatant abuse of power, fueled by bias and a need to prove himself, and Officer Nguyen's reckless shooting of Max, an act of panic and inexperience that cost an innocent life. The evidence was irrefutable, a damning record of injustice laid bare for all to see. Officers Bradley and Nguyen were immediately dismissed from the force for abuse of power, discrimination, and endangering a citizen. They faced criminal charges for animal cruelty and potentially endangering human life, with severe penalties looming that could include jail time. Their reputations were ruined, their careers reduced to ashes. Nguyen, his face heavy with remorse, sent a public apology letter to Sophia, published in the local newspaper, but Sophia barely glanced at it, her heart too burdened by the loss of Max and the trauma she and Amelia had endured. For her, his regret was too late, a hollow gesture that could not undo the pain or bring back her beloved dog. The apology felt like an afterthought, a feeble attempt to salvage a reputation already lost. Karen, meanwhile, faced a different kind of reckoning. The Maplewood Lane Neighbors Facebook group, once a platform for her divisive posts, became a battleground of outrage. Neighbors who'd stayed silent during the incident now condemned her actions, flooding the group with calls for accountability. Her post was deleted, but screenshots circulated, each one a reminder of her prejudice. "How could you do this?" one neighbor wrote. "You've shamed us all," another declared. Karen became a pariah in Maplewood Lane. No one waved to her on Elmwood Avenue. Their glances were cold, filled with contempt and alienation. She stopped attending community events, her absence conspicuous at neighborhood barbecues and book clubs. Within 10 weeks, a bright red "for sale" sign appeared in her front yard, a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of her actions. But her tarnished reputation deterred buyers in a neighborhood that prized prestige and harmony. Karen sat alone in her dim living room, staring at her phone, the deleted post a ghost haunting her screen. She wondered if she could ever change, if she could unlearn the prejudices that had led her to this moment, or if she had irrevocably destroyed her life in Maplewood Lane. The silence of her empty home was deafening, a stark contrast to the vibrant community she'd once felt part of. Diego held a press conference at the county courthouse, drawing national attention from media outlets and community leaders. As the commissioner, he condemned discrimination and abuse of power with unwavering resolve, his voice steady and commanding. He pledged sweeping police reforms to ensure accountability, transparency, and fairness, vowing to protect all residents equally, regardless of race, background, or appearance. He spoke of building a community rooted in equity, compassion, and mutual respect, where no one would face the ordeal Sophia had endured. His words struck a chord, resonating far beyond Crestview County, inspiring hope and calls for change in communities across the region. The image of Diego's SUV blocking the police cruiser became an icon of justice, spreading across news channels, social media platforms, and community forums. It symbolized power used to shield the vulnerable, a vivid reminder that authority, when wielded justly, could right profound wrongs. Sophia and Diego's story became a powerful lesson, a clarion call to action. A single glance, a hasty call, or unchecked power could plunge an innocent person into a nightmare. Max's senseless death deepened this truth, etching it into the collective consciousness of Maplewood Lane. But Sophia wasn't alone in her fight. How many others face these stares daily? The question lingered in every resident's mind, urging them to reflect on their own actions, their own silences, and the role they played in allowing prejudice to fester. At Karen's now empty house, the curtains swayed gently in the breeze, but no suspicious eyes lurked behind them. Her tea sat cold on the table, untouched, a symbol of her isolation. She remained alone, grappling with her downfall, the solitude a steep price for the harm she'd caused. The once welcoming neighborhood now felt like a prison, each glance from a neighbor a reminder of her mistake. In Sophia and Diego's new home, life slowly took root. though the scars of that evening remained. Sophia gently held a framed photo of Max, his bright eyes and wagging tail frozen in time. The pain of his loss was a deep, persistent ache, a scar that reminded her of the injustice and grief she'd endured. But that scar also fueled her purpose, transforming her pain into a powerful motivation. She was determined to fight for a better future, not just for herself, Amelia, and her unborn child, but for all who faced prejudice, for those whose voices were silenced by suspicion and fear. With Diego's steadfast support, she believed they could reshape their community into one defined by kindness, empathy, and unity, a place where no one would fear walking down their own street. 5 months after the incident, Sophia and Diego founded the Maplewood Unity Fund, named for the tree where prejudice flared and justice awoke. The fund provided free legal aid to victims of discrimination and launched educational programs on cultural understanding, compassion, and inclusivity in schools, community centers, and neighborhoods across Crestview County. Sophia became a leading voice, sharing her story in public forums, town halls, and school assemblies, her words touching hearts and sparking conversations about change. Mrs. Clara Evans, moved by the injustice she'd witnessed, joined as a volunteer, leading community dialogues on the importance of speaking out against prejudice. Her presence lent wisdom and gravitas, her silver hair a symbol of the community's elder voice, rising in support of justice. Mr. Patel, who'd once been a silent victim of profiling, also joined the fund's efforts, sharing stories of those overlooked and judged unfairly. His quiet determination added depth to the movement, amplifying voices that had long been ignored. Under Sophia and Diego's leadership, the Maplewood Unity Fund gained widespread support, backed by local businesses, philanthropists, and community leaders. Seeds of kindness, empathy, and justice began to sprout, slowly but steadily pushing back the shadows of prejudice that had once darkened Maplewood Lane. The fund organized workshops, community events, and youth programs, fostering a sense of unity that transcended differences. Neighbors who'd once stayed silent began to engage, attending meetings and sharing their own experiences, creating a ripple effect of change. Now, whenever Sophia walked with Amelia under the maple tree, she no longer felt the chill of scrutinizing eyes. Instead, she felt a quiet peace, a steadfast belief in a community that was changing day by day. The pain of Max's loss lingered, a bittersweet reminder of the cost of prejudice, but it also served as a beacon, guiding her toward a brighter future for her children. Amelia, now more talkative, pointed at the tree and asked about Max, her small voice tinged with sadness, but also hope. Sophia knelt beside her, explaining that Max's memory lived on in their fight for a better world, a world where no one would be judged for who they were. The Maplewood Lane neighborhood, once defined by its silent complicity, began to transform. Neighbors greeted each other with genuine warmth, and the community group shifted from a place of suspicion to one of dialogue and support. The lessons of that evening resonated, a reminder that change was possible, even in the face of deep-seated prejudice. Sophia and Diego's story became a touchstone, a narrative that inspired others to confront their biases and build a more inclusive community. Join us to share stories that inspire change, stories that remind us of the power of compassion and justice. Hit the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notification bell for daily doses of hope, humanity, and the lessons that shape a better future.